today, including, this was like an hour ago, Baylor's running back, Craig Squirrel Williams, who at times looked brilliant and at times was just not always able to play, has entered the transfer portal. This year, his best year. At times, of course, made some, had big games, but also, again, has had issues with injuries on and off. You wonder if this, Craig and Paul, has anything to do. Is this possibility of him following Juice Johnson to Texas Tech? Is this also the possibility of ending up, who's the guy who recruited him, who's at Nebraska, in Matt Rule?
Yeah, I think those are two interesting possibilities. I got to do an interview with Squirrel this past summer, and he is he's a really unbelievable kid, really great, has a lot of intangible leadership qualities and kind of a quiet guy, but very, very interesting person. So it would not surprise me that if there was just a little bit in him to go see what else is out there other than what exactly he knows. But those two would obviously be the front runners because, again, eventually comfort is kind of what you go with down the line. And then it's just been really unfortunate that he's had so many injuries. But he is, not a big dude at all. And you kind of see that. He's a track star. He's built like a track guy. And there are big guys that go and hit you. And I think that's the thing that would always worry me about Squirrel and his long-term health.
Yeah, he was a great player when he was healthy and at 100%. It's just that was so few and far between. We never, I think, really saw a full season where he was that, and a full season where you knew every single week that you had a few touches going to Squirrel. You instead wondered, is Squirrel playing this week? To the point of where you stopped even asking about it, and then you saw him playing a game, you're like, oh, great, awesome, Squirrel's playing. And then, hopefully he gets some carries. And that's what you got, really. And it was just a guessing game as to how impactful he could possibly be. You couldn't do it, for example, if you're going to the national championship game and you're looking at TCU, let's take Kendry Miller's injury out of it. If you were looking though at TCU, you're like, okay, we know Kendry Miller's going to get these touches, we know DeMercado's going to get these touches, and then you sprinkle it out whoever. If Squirrel had hit his stride, you would have gone into games and gone, okay, Richard Reese will get this amount and Squirrel will get this amount, and then divvy him up. But you could never rely on Squirrel to get any carries because you didn't know he was going to play or not, right? And that's sort of how his whole career was, and that was unfortunate. But when he was out there, he was super impactful, and he was very dynamic and super quick and had some moves that not every guy had. And there were times where they needed some critical first downs, and him just being sort of liquidy, he was able to get those, whereas other backs on the roster wouldn't have been able to get those. But we just could never see it all strung together, right, over the course of multiple weeks or a season. But, for his next team, maybe they are able to. And if they are, then they'll get a superstar in the making because I do think he is super talented. But, yeah, because of his size, he is a little more prone to injuries than probably others are. Probably some of that's just a stroke of bad luck as well. There were a lot of times going to practices where you'd eye him and he'd be over to the side working out. That was a big case this offseason. And they were careful with him because he had major knee injuries, and they didn't want to have him out there just like anybody else going through, full contact drills. So they had to kind of handle him a little differently. And I think they did a great job of getting out of him what they could, but maybe somewhere else can get even more. And, like I said, if they do, that'll be huge because he is a dynamic player, and I hate to see that he's going to end his career somewhere else. This is the part of the transfer portal I kind of hate, but at the same time, he was a guy who was around here for several years. He's got his degree out of, I imagine he's going to be
transfers.
Yeah, he's going to be a Baylor guy through and through. He's just going to end it somewhere else. And so kudos to Squirrel Williams on what he did here. I think he's a lovable guy, a huge fan favorite, and good luck to him.
Yeah, and based on what Craig said about divvying up the carries, he does need to go somewhere where, if you really look at what Baylor needs to do to protect the quarterbacks next year, to guard against the fact that they still need to build chemistry with the wide receivers and the quarterbacks and all that, I think they need to have something that, again, is more reliable, where you can say Richard Reese, Dominic Richardson, Quaylon Jones is going to be, or whatever it is, whoever the third guy is, and this is what we expect out of each and every one, and we'd like to rely on. I think that they're not in a position where they can have a wild card in there. They need more sure things.
If you are a team though, and I could totally see Texas Tech doing this or Nebraska doing this, if you're in need of a guy who you're like, hey, we just need like 5 touches from you a week, something like that, or, just a couple looks even a week, he'd be your guy. I mean, because if he's healthy and he can be out there, he can break one open. There is no doubt about that. He had a game-breaking ability that this roster was severely lacking this year. I remember him almost winning the Iowa State game by himself a couple years ago, but he got hurt in that game. But he was running like he was about to go win that game by himself. So he is capable. And so I think somebody who doesn't have to rely on him, like you're saying, Paul, don't expect him to come into any school and get 20 touches every week. But if you want him as a complimentary back and a change of pace, absolutely, he would kill it for somebody, and he will, I'm sure.
So there's that with Squirrel Williams. Also, we knew this was, I guess, reported, but it's official now with LSU's quarterback Walker Howard. Max Olson, who covers this like diligently, has entered the transfer portal from earlier today. Again, that was reported a day or two ago, but never actually had entered. And there may be some more news on entering portals between now and Sunday because the deadline for the first phase closes, I think, on the 15th. But TCU, that's what we've heard. That's where most of the smoke has been. But Ole Miss and Florida among the schools to watch Max Olson on the top 50 recruit LSU quarterback Walker Howard.
Well, TCU did Sam Jackson transfer to Cal. So that was, kind of their, young backup that was going to be behind Chandler Morris. And yeah, Florida better be on everybody's. Like if Florida, they better, every transfer quarterback that goes in that has any value, it better be on theirs because their plan is probably changed. Nothing, official yet on Jaden Rashada, but that appears to have blown up, and now their 2023 quarterback plan is way off kilter.
Yeah, they need a QB. They were after, partially Sawyer Robinson, and he chose Baylor, obviously, but they've been connected with a few different names, and so I wouldn't be surprised at all. Walker Howard's one of those. Wouldn't be surprised at all if that's, where he were to end up, but TCU is very clearly in the hunt for quarterbacks. So that makes sense. And then, elsewhere it does, for Ole Miss. And by the way, Ole Miss is a huge splash today, but that we'll get to. But Florida, the only thing with Florida is just don't talk NIL, I guess, or don't get too deep in the weeds on that because, I look at my timeline, just pop it up, and like 2 of the first 10 stories that I see are like the full expose on Jaden Rashada's NIL blow up and, what happened there and like this whole piece on The Athletic about it. And so, they need to pour some water on those flames and move beyond that. And getting Walker Howard would be one way to kind of do that. But, yeah, all 3 of those programs need QBs, so that makes some sense.
All right, so then there's